was very controversial because people thought it was very inappropriate that a young lady was having a conversation with a possible romantic partner without her father's knowledge. Hello, my name is Rosie Harte. I'm a historian and author, and today I'm going to be showing you some Victorian railway paintings which depict dramatic scenes of life whilst travelling in fantastic railway carriages like the one we're in today at the National Railway Museum. This is a painting by the German artist Berthold Woltze from 1874, and it's called The Irritating Gentleman. It's an example of a really popular style of painting from the Victorian period called the problem picture. Problem pictures drop us, the audience, into the middle of a very dramatic scene where something is going wrong, and we're supposed to use all of the clues of etiquette and manners to identify what that problem is and think about how we might react to it. So in this painting, we see an eccentric older man leaning over the back of a railway bench to talk to a young woman who doesn't look particularly happy. She's making eye contact with us, there's a tear in the corner of her eye, and there are a few clues which might tell us what is being said in this situation. Now, the first thing that Victorian viewers would have noticed about this painting is what the young girl is wearing. She is wearing black from top to toe, which tells us that she's probably in mourning. And this big carpet bag that's next to her on the seat, that tells us that she's travelling quite a long way. We can probably assume that this girl is returning home from boarding school because of the death of a loved one. So she's already not having a particularly great time. The man behind her is what the Victorians would have called a masher. A masher is a type of man who doesn't think that etiquette and social rules apply to him. He thinks he should be allowed to talk to anyone about anything and believes that he should always be the centre of attention, wearing unusual and extravagant clothes. So here we have a man with a very dramatic moustache, and he's wearing a red tie and smoking inside the train carriage, which was completely inappropriate in the Victorian times. Now, the artist has done something very special here. He has put us in a position as if we're sat in the rail car with this scene. We're sat opposite, we are looking at this scene unfolding, and we are supposed to ask ourselves, what would we do in this situation? These are a pair of paintings by the artist Abraham Solomon from 1854. They show two similar scenes, one taking place in a first-class carriage and the other taking place in a second-class carriage. This painting here is called The Meeting, and this one is called The Parting. Inside the first-class carriage, we see a sumptuous scene of railway delights. There is a father who has fallen asleep at the side of the rail carriage next to his beautiful young daughter, who has struck up a conversation with a fellow traveller, a dashing young man who has come back from a fishing holiday. We can see all sorts of typical railway elements around them. The father has a little railway etiquette guide in front of him, and the daughter has an example of a yellowback book. This was an exciting new invention in the publishing world that coincided with the rise of the railway. It was the forerunner to the paperback book, and it emerged because travellers wanted quick, cheap, and easy to transport reads when they were on their journeys. When this painting was revealed to the public, it was very controversial because while this may seem like a completely harmless scene, people thought it was very inappropriate that a young lady was having a conversation with a possible romantic partner without her father's knowledge. So the artist was forced to revise this scene and repaint it a year later. This is the revised version of the first-class painting. We can see that the father is now awake and he is in the center of the painting. He is in the middle of this young couple, so he's mediating the conversation. And the daughter has been pushed over to the side. Her clothes have also changed. Etiquette guides, which gave advice to young girls on how they should behave whilst on railway journeys, told them that they should try and make themselves almost invisible through their clothing to avoid any unwanted, harassing conversations. They were told to wear big bonnets that covered their faces and sometimes even veils. And they were also told to cover up their beautiful dresses with drab outerwear, which is exactly what has happened to the daughter in this painting. She is significantly more covered up. Another change that's been made in this painting is that the young man now wears a navy uniform. Because the theme was no longer about two lovers meeting for the first time, the story about meeting and parting with the companion painting didn't work quite as well anymore. So this has become a scene of a man returning from his time in the Navy. This second-class painting becomes more of a prequel. It shows a scene where a grieving mother, a widow, is taking her young son, who she can no longer afford to take care of at home, to embark on a career in the Navy. This is a great depiction of what a second and third class carriage would have looked like on a typical train in the Victorian period. There are no cushy furnishings like in the first class carriage, and instead the walls are plastered with different advertisements for destinations like Australia or Canada, which maybe is where this young boy is headed. This is a painting by Augustus Leopold Egg from the 1860s, and it's called The Travelling Companions. Now, this is a really interesting painting because art historians aren't 100% sure what we're looking at here. Egg was an artist who was famous for his problem pictures, but is there a problem here? What are we supposed to be looking at? Now, some historians believe that this is a depiction of appropriate and inappropriate passenger behaviour for young women. On this side here, we see a lady who is reading a book. Her attention is completely absorbed and she's active. She's using her time appropriately, whereas her companion is falling asleep and her hair is dishevelled. So she is an example of a sort of lazy and not particularly attentive passenger. But Egg, as an artist, was very interested in women's vanity and looking at when women did things wrong. And there was a lot of debate about women travelling in the 19th century. Was it appropriate for them to travel on trains by themselves? In this painting, I believe that Egg is trying to get us to ask the question, is there anything wrong in this painting? The two girls in this carriage are wearing grey dresses, and etiquette guides told girls that grey was a good colour to wear. It was unassuming and didn't draw attention to them. But these dresses are particularly glamorous. They're very shiny, and they have these huge skirts. They're taking up a lot of space, and that was considered very inappropriate. On their laps, they also have a very fashionable type of hat called a pork pie hat. And now these are particularly scandalous because unlike traditional bonnets, they don't cover any of the wearer's head. They don't protect her from unwanted glances. And even worse, they were popularized by famous courtesans. These hats were used to represent fashionable young girls who maybe didn't care so much about etiquette and manners. So we are perhaps being told to view these girls as fashionable pleasure seekers rather than young women travelling out of necessity. Thank you for watching. I hope that's given you a glimpse into life on the Victorian Railway. My name is Rosie Harte. I am a historian and author, and you can find me on almost all social media channels at Rosie H. Harte.